Good morning, friends. Another Friday. Friday, the 10th of July, 2020. And we're going to be looking at Daniel 4, 1 to 27, under the title of Who Holds the Power. Some years ago, when I was working in the printing industry, I was working on the Northern Bank calendar. It's now Danske Bank. And we printed, as I recall, upwards of 60,000 of these calendars, and they were given out to all of the branches. Definitely a thing of the past now, I think. But they held a competition for photographers, and if you won, then it was your photograph that they used. It was a very prestigious thing to have your photograph in the Northern Bank calendar. All the photographs came to me, and my speciality was the photographic side of printing. Now, it had been a hectic day, and colour enhancement on each of the pictures, and a wee bit here and a wee bit there. Photographers are choosy people, and a pressure to get the thing printed resulted in the photograph, the only one in existence, by the way, being buried under a pile of test proofs, which I gathered up and prepared for the bin. And you've guessed it, the picture was torn in two. Well, my boss was so sympathetic, and my heart raced. Come up with a good story, Trevor, because we can't tell him the truth. And by the way, you're telling him, and you can take the consequences, including any financial compensation. That was nice of him, wasn't it? So the next day at a senior meeting, I told them that I would be meeting with the bank and the photographer and would simply tell them the truth. And there was panic, and they threatened all sorts of things. But the bank and the photographer came and sat down, and I apologised, and I told them exactly what had happened. And there was a silence as the photographer dropped his head, and I waited for the storm. But it didn't come. Look, he said, I've lost the original, but we have 60,000 copies printed. Don't worry yourself about it. And by the way, I really appreciate your honesty. To which my boss replied, well, that's the sort of company that we are. We always tell the truth, no matter what. Dear me. Well, verses 6 to 7 of Daniel 4 reads, So I commanded that all the wise men of Babylon be brought before me to interpret the dream for me. And when the magicians, enchanters, astrologers, and diviners came, I told them the dream, but they could not interpret it for me. Now, folks, we've had this now with Nebuchadnezzar a couple of times now with these dreams. He seems to suffer with them quite a bit on here, but these dreams, of course, are all coming from God. Now, having got through Daniel 1 to 3 and all that has happened so far, to me, reading this story of a tree and it being cut down and all the circumstances around it, it was pretty obvious that this was all about Nebuchadnezzar himself. I can't for 1 minute even think that these supposed wise men, that they didn't see this. Of course they saw it. Of course they knew what the dream meant. But it was much easier and safer to lie and to just act dumb. Now, friends, I'm preaching a few times over the weekend, the OC and Deneen. And yesterday I really struggled with a passage, and I found an easy way and a difficult way through it. Now, you can guess which route I took, and I hope you've guessed the right one. But suffice to say that it is always better to please God and not man. So Daniel is sent for here. Here again is a truth. Daniel wasn't the king's first choice, but he was the last resort. And friends, no matter what the situation is, our first priority as believers must be to bring it to God. It's so easy to do, and yet we fret and we worry and we talk to others and we look up the internet. Why? Because deep down we are all still learning to trust God and to rely on him. Friends, don't make God your last resort. And think of me over the weekend in these passages. Verse 8 then. Finally. Now that says it all, doesn't it? That just about hits it on the head. Finally, Daniel came into my presence and I told him the dream. So says Nebuchadnezzar. And then he says, he is called Belteshazzar, after the name of my God, and the spirit of the holy gods is in him. Can you imagine being in the company of these charlatans? And as David interpreted the dream of how the tree was chopped down, I would say these men all laughed to themselves and said, well, Daniel's for the chop, never mind the king, because the king just can't handle the truth. Friends, when it comes to handling the truth, why is it so easy to tell lies? Telling a lie is something that we all did as children, but lying can trip us up even as long-time Christians. I always say that if you're going to be a good liar, you need to have a good memory. And thankfully, my memory is fading a bit. The underlying motive, of course, is usually a desire to protect yourself or ourselves in some way. We lie to get out of trouble, to avoid an unwanted situation, to receive acceptance from other people, to bolster our image, to hide our flaws, or for some other self-serving reason. And scarily, we can lie when we present the gospel to people. Remember what I said about a difficult way through a passage and an easy way through a passage? How so, you say? Tell lies in presenting the gospel? Well, saying one thing and living another way is a lie. And when you tell people about salvation, sugarcoating it to make it more palatable is to make it a gospel of lies. Presenting the gospel in church without referring to sin or Satan and hell and all of the nasty consequences is a gospel of lies. And if you look at any of the sermons that Jesus preached to the people, he didn't mess about. Neither should we, friends, even in personal witnessing to other people. Always tell people the consequences of their sin. When Nebuchadnezzar had an alarming dream, the Lord gave Daniel the interpretation. The king was going to become insane. He was going to live like a wild animal for 7 periods of time. That's not an easy thing to tell the king. At that moment, Daniel had to decide whether he would tell the king the truth or hide it. In those days, giving the king a bad report could have cost the messenger his life. Hence that term, don't shoot the messenger. Yet despite the danger, Daniel held to his convictions and he delivered the Lord's message to Nebuchadnezzar. And here's why Daniel could speak the truth in the face of danger. He trusted God. Since he was doing exactly what the Lord wanted, he wasn't frightened into compromise. See, obedience to God is worth far more than anything we could ever gain by speaking and telling lies or doctoring the truth in an effort to just stay safe and uncontroversial. So for today then, are you willing to commit to speaking truth even when it's costly? Seeking to please the Lord and letting him handle the consequences will always be the best course of action, my friends. The Lord bless you real good this lovely Friday morning.